Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week we have officially reached the end of summer blockbuster season. We've got Sinister II and Hitman Agent 47, both big box office disappointments. Plus, we're also going to review the indie movie People, Places, Things and the Oscar-nominated foreign film Wild Tales. Our double feature of older films is going to be Joe's old classic pick Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and we also have 1931 Oscar winner Bad Girl for the A to Z. First up, though, is Sinister II, premiering to just over 10 million, and Justin's going to tell us about that.
James Ransom returns as now ex-Deputy So-and-so, I wish I were making this up, working privately to uncover more of the mystery regarding the brutal murders associated with the demon Bagul, no longer Mr. Boogie. His investigation brings him into contact with Courtney Collins, played by Shannon Sossamon, a single mother of two young boys who may have become Bagul's next targets. Take every single possible gripe that was, for the most part, minor in regards to the first movie, and amp it up, and you have a fairly accurate representation of the monstrosity this movie is. The plot holes from the first one that were, for the most part, avoidable, so much worse. It doesn't answer any of the questions, it tries to expand the mythology and ends up creating more problems, and the biggest issue, the movie only takes itself seriously about half the time. Sure, there's jump scares, but there are all these weird interludes where they try and throw in comedy and this one subplot that goes absolutely nowhere with the Collins family's father, who obviously is divorced but is trying to get control of the kids back. It's just horrible on so many levels. The scares are predictable, and for the most part, it doesn't really go anywhere. If anything, it just creates even more questions. This is a disaster of a sequel. I hope there is never going to be a third movie. I leave it with an F.
Yeah, I knew that. I knew Justin would hate this. It's not good, but let's hear from Joe about Sinister II.
Well, first of all, I want to say you guys introduced me to Sinister a while back, early in Film Fanatics. I loved it. It's probably one of the better horror movies I've seen in a long time, at least at that point. It still is. It was a really, really fantastic movie. Very scary. But I wasn't really excited for this one. Definitely was a lot less quality than I was expecting. I didn't expect it to be great on the same par as the first movie. Horror sequels rarely, if ever, are. But this one definitely fails for the most part in the horror department, which is definitely a big problem. I mean, you're right, Justin, there are a couple jump scares, but I would say maybe like one or two got me. The rest I was just kind of rolling my eyes, well, here it comes, and I found myself laughing at a couple points. I believe, if my memory serves me, the main character of this movie, wasn't that like the comic relief guy in the last one?
Pretty much, yeah.
Deputy So-and-so, yeah.
Yeah, that was really weird. But, see, okay, my perception of this movie is really bizarre, because I will admit, as a horror movie, it does fail. But what it is inside is actually kind of a decent, like, family drama, which is really, really not correct. but I found myself kind of engaged with that storyline. It just felt like it was a completely different movie that was completely out of place, and they just stuck random elements of Sinister in there. So it was incredibly uneven. But I did find myself kind of caring about what was going to happen to these people, even though I thought the twist with the kid was pretty obvious. I mean, they kind of imply something about one, and then, but you clearly know one kid's worse than the other. And
it's the exact same twist from the original.
Yeah, basically so, yeah. But I think it was handled even less poorly. So, I mean, it has some atmosphere, I guess, some creepiness, but, I mean, it's just pretty much a generic horror with the kind of okay family drama mixed in there. So I leave it with the C-.
Well, you're both kind of right. Joe, the child custody storyline is actually one of the few mildly interesting ones.
That's the only thing I cared about. I was like, well, this isn't bad.
But it's a horror movie, so it doesn't make any sense to be there.
Exactly.
But it's really the only thing I cared about.
If it wasn't there would be nothing.
There'd be nothing. The acting is atrocious from everybody. The leader of the kids is like okay, but everybody else is pretty terrible. The scares, they are trying... they vary. They're trying really hard, like, on the one hand. The creepy record that the kids are playing while they're watching the films. Like, that's...
Which I wasn't entirely sure if I bought, but...
I didn't either.
Did Trent Reznor work on their soundtrack or something?
Exactly.
It's some pretty good quality.
Who has that record lying around, though, to just be listened to?
I don't know, man.
You know, the films that Bagul made were creepy, as to be expected. That was sort of the hook for the first movie, which was very enjoyable in the first movie. Here, it's... I mean, they're still a little bit frightening. I mean, frightening's not the right word. Unnerving, but also commonplace.
Pretty standard.
Because of the first movie. They were so cleverly done in the first one. And here it's like, sort of like Justin said, it's sort of kind of poking fun at, trying to be like more silly with it.
I had to say, I think we talked about it before it came out, but Fishing Trip, I know what happens and it is obviously not good, but I was kind of, obvious CGI aside, I thought it was kind of silly.
Well, they were all kind of silly, except for the electrocution one. That one's kind of creepy.
The one with the snow was kind
of... Yeah, that's true.
That was probably the most eyes.
Yeah, you're right.
That was kind of messed up.
So there were like a couple that were creepy.
Those things, I'm like, yeah, they're all right.
But the other ones... And then I also don't understand the concept that the kids were trying to like convey to the other kid. Watch all the movies and you won't have nightmares anymore.
I wouldn't buy that.
How did he buy that? How was he like, that sounds great?
He's a dumb kid now.
Yeah, I mean, he did leave a number of times, but still.
After watching like 8 of them.
I know, like they kept telling him he wouldn't get nightmares from it. I don't know how that works, but I'm in between you guys. But it's certainly not an F. It's a D+ for me. I think it was better than some of the earlier horror movies we got this year. It's better than Lazarus. It's better than Woman in Black 2. It's funny, the horror movies this year are either really good or really terrible.
Yeah. There's no in between.
I haven't given any B's or C range for any horror movie this year.
That's interesting.
Isn't that weird?
You're right, though.
But I think that's the same for all of us. Like, we all really enjoyed It Follows.
Yeah.
The Babadook was technically last year, but we did it this year as a home media moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other end, you've got all of these other ones that are just terrible.
Well, the problem is, because most horror movies don't cost a whole lot to make, they're being done by these people who just don't know, let's make a really cheap horror flick and make a couple bucks off of it. They don't care if it's scary or not.
Budget isn't really an issue, though, because the other ones that we reviewed that we really liked didn't have a dramatically high budget.
No, but you could tell that they at least put some thought behind what was actually there.
Well, that's the difference.
Yeah, but the reason I disagree with that statement is you said the people that make these movies. Blumhouse typically doesn't churn out garbage.
Don't they?
They don't. Do you think they do?
The Gallows?
That's what I'm saying. Typically, they don't. Well, so that's why I can't agree that they're...
Ouija?
Ouija.
No, well, if they did Ouija wasn't great. But again, it was middling. I think I gave it like a C or a C-. It was not as bad as these ones this year that we've had.
Okay, that's fair. I mean,
now, Ouija 2, I don't know why that got greenlit.
Because the first one probably only cost $3 million to make.
Oh, my God.
But no, Blumhouse, I mean, The Conjuring, The Gift.
That's fair.
You know, they typically do good stuff. So, right... That's why I can't say that the people behind it don't care what they're making. Maybe they thought this was a good idea?
Well, I feel like they're just trying to back horror movies because...
I agree. They're cheap to make.
Yeah, they're cheap to make.
And they always turn a profit because they're made for $1 to $3 million. Even on a terrible opening weekend like a Gallows or like this, they make their money back opening weekend.
Not to mention with this one, you also have brand association. The first one was pretty well received. It wasn't... perfect.
True. The first one also had Ethan Hawke in it, which I know he's not a huge box office draw, but he's still a name. I couldn't tell you one person that's in this movie.
No.
And we see a lot of movies.
This is true.
Other than Deputy So-and-so. I mean, the mom looked vaguely familiar, but I didn't recognize the name.
That's the first movie I've seen her in since Rules of Attraction, actually.
Oh, your favorite.
Yeah, so she hasn't had a very lustrous career.
No, I would say not.
But I mean, the biggest issue with this one... And I'll be honest, I did not want to fail this movie. I spent probably the majority of the time I was in the theater watching and thinking, there has to be something redeemable about this movie. And it just kept coming up empty. There's one kind of cool attempt at a long take early on, gets cut way too quickly. Anything they try to do that's scary, the first one does about 8 times better. It more or less just rides altogether on... the original Sinister's coattails. It's kind of ridiculous.
Well, it's a typical problem with horror sequels specifically. I mean, I think all sequels can fall into that territory, but horror sequels specifically are, I think, regarded as some of the worst.
Well, no argument there.
So I can't dispute any of those claims, but I did think it was mildly scary at some parts, and I did enjoy the dramatic, the child custody.
Yeah, the random dramatic
drama in this film is what works about it.
If the dad wasn't such a bad actor, I probably would have been on board with it.
Everybody's a bad actor.
Nobody was.
Yes,
it's so true. The acting is weak. Even Deputy So-and-so was like all right in the first movie. You're right, Joe. He was the goofy side character, which I guess didn't require a lot of acting chops. But here he's even worse, I feel, acting-wise. I guess maybe because he's going for
honestly
dramatic.
I thought everybody's acting was mediocre, which is honestly worse than
That's
worse.
putting it politely.
No, I mean, I thought everyone was giving passable performances. It was kind of by the numbers, but, I mean, that's the worst thing, because if you're a bad actor, at least you're memorable.
All right, well, let's move on to another box office disappointment here for opening weekend. That was Hitman Agent 47. Joe?
Yeah. Hitman Agent 47 is a recent film. It's apparently American and German. Action film directed by Alexander Bach. It was written by Skip Woods, who, as you guys might know, wrote the original Hitman film, which was so loved.
Wow.
And Michael Finch as well. Now, as most of you guys probably know, it is based on the Hitman video game series. And its main character, the mysterious assassin, Agent 47, who is portrayed by Rupert Friend, I believe his name is.
Yep.
Also, Hannah Ware is in the movie, and Zachary Quinto is the bad guy. An assassin, the hitman, teams up with a woman who to help find her father and uncover the mysteries around her ancestry. And then they work together to take down the mysterious syndicate, which originally created the agents, which is kind of combining the plots of the first game and the most recent one, with not exactly perfect results. This movie, I'm not sure if you guys will agree with me on this one, but it's perfectly fine. I never saw the first movie. I heard it was pretty bad.
It's awful.
Yeah, you don't need to.
It's terrible.
So, I mean, I wasn't really expecting much from this, but typically, when you go in with no expectations, that tends to help. I'm going to start with the positives. There are a few. Only a few. Really. I think the best thing about this movie is that Rupert Friend does a pretty good job playing the Hitman character. Now, is there a whole lot to him? No, but I believed it. He looked like him, he acted like him, and I'm a big fan of the Hitman games, so that was definitely a plus for me. The action, while it certainly doesn't always follow the Hitman standard, especially as it gets in the further acts, was okay. I actually found myself not being bored with the action sequences, and there were some nice little hints to the game when he kills some people, the constant switching of outfits. I kind of liked that, so you could tell everything about the Hitman character was actually done pretty well, which is important to me. Then there's pretty much everything else.
There we go.
The story is all over the place. It's kind of frustrating because the first game has a really good story, and the most recent one had a good one too. The Hitman games are pretty decent for their storylines, so they honestly could have just picked one and ran with it. And the biggest issue, though, which is that the way they did the Hitman character was okay in the movie. He was fine. But people go to a Hitman movie to see the Hitman. He's not the main character in his own movie. It's this other girl who, the trailers pretty much give it away, but she's the ultimate agent, and she's better than him, even though most of the movie she really isn't. And they say her father, basically experimented on her and made her the source of this power, but instead of heightening her senses, which they say in the movie, that's not true. She's psychic. She's straight up psychic. I mean, and that's honestly lazy writing. Also, Quinto, honestly, is not doing a very good job here. He's kind of phoning it in, but, he's honestly one of the most disappointing parts of the movie, sadly, and hard to believe, but there are some cool little things here. Some of the supporting cast was good. Game of Thrones alumni was her father. Duke Leto from Dune had a random little cameo. He was the passport guy. So there were some cool things there. And I saw it with a friend of mine. And so there were some entertaining aspects, though. So for me, it got the main part right with the main character, which I personally liked, being a fan of the games. And it had some serious guilty pleasure aspects. I was making fun of it the whole time. It's not technically great, but I did enjoy it more than Sinister II, so I leave it with the C.
All right. Well, I gave the original 2007 Hitman an F. Now, I don't know the games from anything, but I figured, all right, well, this one has to at least be better than that one. It's actually not.
Oh, really?
It's also terrible. I don't know how a movie that's almost all action and no story can be so boring. There's nothing interesting in this movie. Now, if they got the Hitman character right, hats off to them. I wouldn't know that. So I can't give it any points for that because I don't know the difference. But what I do know is what's enjoyable and what makes sense and what doesn't. And this movie makes no sense. You're absolutely right. The whole movie, they tout how she's, what is she, Agent 90 or something?
Correct.
Yeah.
Because she's that many points better than him. But you're right. The whole movie, she's not really better than him. And yet, she is the quote-unquote main character of the film.
Not the Hitman.
Called Hitman Agent 47, not this lady,
90.
Agent 90. So, okay. And I understand that these guys aren't human, so by nature, they're not supposed to have much in the way of emotion, but every person in this movie is sleepwalking through the role. It's by leaps and bounds. Quinto, his worst performance. I don't know what happened to him in this, but typically I like him. I'm still not really sure what was happening. You just told me about the plot. I suppose that's the basic plot of this film, but it still doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it's pretty ridiculous.
Yes, so it's stupid, boring, unnecessary. So for the first time ever, gentlemen, I give 2 movies in a series Fs.
Oh wow,
it's awful. Justin?
Well, for this one, I feel like we're stuck asking the same question we always do with video game movies. Why are we getting so many bad ones? And my argument is still the same. Because studios aren't picking any of the good storylines that would make for great movies. The Hitman games are not about the story. Can they be good? Yes. But with the Hitman games, it's not all about the story. It's about the versatility of the gameplay, which is great for a video game. But when you're seeing a movie, you're not playing a game. And they don't seem to grasp that concept. And when it's a slightly over 90-minute movie, just chewing through scenery left and right to try and get through, it has a couple moments of guilty pleasure at the start, and a kind of interesting concept later on with what if this engineered superhuman was obsolete, but then it doesn't go anywhere. It's slightly better than the first one, which I just thought was dry as a bone and just frankly uninteresting. But it's not a good movie, and I really feel like we need to let this franchise just stay a video game, because I don't think we're ever going to get a decent film adaptation out of it. I leave it with a D.
Okay, well now, what if, Joe's saying that the storylines for these games are good, what if they did take one of the storylines out of the game and made it into a movie? Would that be interesting, Justin?
But here's the thing. Just because the story works for the game doesn't mean it's going to work for a movie. Another big issue I feel like the Hitman series has as a video game versus as a movie is Agent 47 is a flatter than flat character. He's not that interesting.
From what I know about him, I mean, that seems to be right. His design is not that interesting, so I never understood why they wanted to give him his own movie anyway.
Well,
because guns, explosions, people will come.
No, to be fair, you're right.
No, they won't.
The main draw of the games really is like the violence and the versatility. Like you said, you can be stealthy or not. But admittedly, he's not exactly the most exciting character. But, I mean, it's not to imply the character doesn't have some depth. I mean, he has a lot going on. Just because he speaks, in a monotonous tone doesn't mean that doesn't have any character. I mean, there's a lot going on there. Like Hitman 2, admittedly, I'm not going to pretend like these movies could ever be the best thing ever. I will agree that Hitman, even if they made the best Hitman movie ever, I highly doubt it would ever be like an A+ movie. But it could be like, in the B's easily. You have this dark brooding character, he goes on a revenge plot. Like in Hitman 2, okay, the plot of the first game, he takes down the agency. In the second game, he's hiding out. He's living as a priest trying to contend with not being a hitman, even though it's going against his programming. And then a priest he's living with gets kidnapped, and he has to go take him down, find the guy. That's a pretty basic plot.
Either of that seems a lot more interesting than what we got.
That's what I'm saying. If they just picked any of the games, any of them, and just turned into a movie, it would at least be okay.
But, I mean, I think it still speaks to my point. Yes, these games are obviously successful as video games. The problem is, I don't think any of those stories are going to work as a promising film franchise, which is what this is heavily trying to gun for. And even coming into this one, they're trying to set up a sequel, which was horrible on so many levels.
That was pretty bad.
It was misguided for sure.
That was pretty rough.
But those plot lines that Joe just mentioned for the games are far more interesting than either of the films gave us.
There are good stories in the games.
Is it worth basing a franchise off of? Probably not. I honestly, I do think the character is kind of boring because of that's how he's designed, and I'm sure it is fun to play him, on the Xbox, but Justin's right. Do I want to watch that for an hour and a half? No.
Well, to be fair, I did think to myself, I would rather be playing the games. So,
Right.
I can't really pretend like I was like, yeah, but...
And that makes sense.
It does,
Right.
but I think that there were some fun little appeals to the games. And I do think they got his character right, which I don't know.
Well, and that, for somebody that enjoys the game, that's important.
I liked it. I thought he looked cool. I thought he worked well with the part for what little it required, and he moved like him, and, I mean, it's not a good movie. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like it is.
Your C is quite surprising.
Yeah, but I liked Half Past Dead more than this, so, remember, guilty pleasure for me.
Well, that is true.
If I enjoy it, I'm not going to pretend like I don't.
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't enjoy it, and so that is also reflected in my grade.
I'm fine with that.
Up next, we're going to do People, Places, Things. In this, Jermaine Clement plays Will, a graphic novelist and teacher who finds himself newly single after finding his wife cheating on him and trying to figure out his new personal life while also being in his daughter's lives as much as he can. His daughters are played by real-life sisters Gia and Andrea Gadsby. Jessica Williams plays one of his students, Kat, who invites him over for dinner after a half breakdown in class, but really she wants to set him up with her mom, played by Regina Hall. People, Places, Things is that perfect end-of-summer indie comedy. It's got a storyline that we've seen countless times, but because of writer-director James C. Strauss's script and winning performances from Clement and Hall, and really just about everybody, it fires on most cylinders. It is fairly predictable, but it's a good study in human interaction with a variety of different relationship types. My big gripe with it, though, is that, Joe, I think you'll appreciate this, some characters or incidents really could have been fleshed out a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the biggest issue with the movie. The movie kind of whizzes by, and I would have liked to have seen more that maybe I wasn't expecting instead of just the basics, acted well and written well. I would have liked to seen a little bit of the fleshing out, but it's a very charming film. I give it a B+. Justin?
I think you're right on a lot of points with this one, Dan. You got to give it to Jermaine Clement. He knows what roles to play, and more importantly, how to have fun with them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like with this one, because it's slightly over 80 minutes, it's a little bit rushed in its execution. It leaves a lot of things...
Quite, yeah.
A little things underdeveloped. Some characters could have had more to do. But what I liked about it was its honesty. It really felt like a legitimate indie comedy / partial love story, handling things realistically and letting the humor feel natural. It's predictable, but I never felt like there were moments where I was saying, I just flat out don't buy this. Though the one thing that really surprised me that I wish they had done more with was their knowledge and explanation of analyzing comic books, especially in terms of its growing role in popular culture, was really spot on. Yet I feel like it's just sort of like a indie, quirky, almost like a punchline at times. And I felt like they could have just done so much more with that. And it was a pity, because I felt like that could have been a really unique element. It's still a pretty good movie. I laughed. There were a couple emotional scenes. But I feel like it also could have been a little bit more. I leave with the B.
Okay. Joe, how did it grab you?
Grabbed me about the same way, I would say. I think the best thing by far, Clement, man... I mean,
he's so versatile, too.
Very versatile, and his character here, I really, really felt for the character, and he was just so likable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just, and that's very important when you have a story like this, where you have this character who could be towing the line between doing some things that are irresponsible, maybe, with what he's going through, but it is very honest, and it is very natural, but also kind of predictable. You guys touched on a lot of the points that did kind of bug me. There were some characters and elements, like, you're right. I mean, the comic book thing would have been cool, but it's really just kind of a basic backdrop there, and it's... I gave it a pass because it is actually integral to the character, but with some of the transitions, okay, so this is this indie movie's quirky little thing, to save on some animation, they'll do some stills, and I like Regina Hall's daughter, really interesting dynamic there, but really a lot of untapped potential.
Right.
His ex-wife's soon-to-be possible husband, there were some interesting possibilities there. I love the kids, too. Like, the scenes with him and the kids were just some of the best scenes. Just, it was so great. What wonderful little child actresses. Mm-hmm. They really did a good job. I loved those scenes.
And their chemistry with him is really good, too.
It was,
you buy that
easily,
he's their dad.
Easily my favorite parts of the movie were with them together. It really did feel like a father having fun with his kids and the situation. And there's so much love in the movie. There really is love. And that is at the heart of the story. But unfortunately, it's a little too short. It's kind of safe in some ways. It feels kind of by the numbers, but there's some great performances, there's some good writing, and I was actually glad to see Regina Hall in kind of a more dramatic role, and she does a really good job, which was honestly a surprise for me. I wasn't expecting her to be that good in it, but they had good chemistry through, but also another plot line that kind of, sadly,
I would have liked to see a lot more with
doesn't
with
really
that.
go anywhere. So if this movie had been a little more fleshed out, I think it, and maybe taken a chance or two more, would have impressed me. But on the whole, I'm with Dan here. I give it a B+. It was a very enjoyable little movie.
I'm glad you brought up Regina Hall's performance, because I have to say, I think she is a lot better than the roles that she takes and has been given. Listeners, if you're unfamiliar with her, think of any non-Tyler Perry urban comedy of the last 3 years and she was in it. Both Think Like a Man movies, About Last Night, it's sort of her thing. But she is a really good actress, and she is funny. The opening scene with them at the table that we see in the preview as well, they have a nice little back and forth. She was actually kind of funny in the one scene in Vacation she was in.
Yeah.
Where he's telling Christina Applegate, right? I mean, Justin, I know you hated Vacation, but that was a funny scene, right?
No, it was one of the more entertaining bits.
And I think because of her kind of, wit and acting chops there. So I was glad to see her sort of spreading out to a little bit more dramatic. But right, that's probably the main plot that I wanted to see more of. And also with her daughter. You're right, Joe. I don't know that I needed to see more with the guy that his wife was cheating on him with. That was to me, that was the most basic part of the story. So I was okay there, but I definitely wanted to see more with him and Regina Hall and the daughter.
I was curious, do you think that one kid in his class actually has a college career ahead of him? Because he was not getting anything.
No, he really wasn't.
I was like, I don't know if he's going to make it. I don't know.
But...
Pretty true to life, I would say.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was like, that's just kind of sad.
In both community college and regular college, yes, there's that kid everywhere.
Yeah, just it's... sad.
Yeah, it's true. I'm not exactly sure why they needed to give him the graphic novel part as well. Or do one or the other. I mean, I feel like if the movie's only going to be, 90 minutes or less, I don't know that he needs two career paths that we need to worry about.
Because he supports himself through teaching and he does the comics on the side because it's like his passion.
Extra income, too.
But like Justin said then, let's give us more of that.
Well, or drop it,
or drop it completely, I guess is my point.
Well, one or the other, exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't, he is a comic book artist, that's what they ran with, but
his way in to meet the daughter is that she's one of his students, so it's like he also had to be a teacher unless they came up with something else.
And that could have really been anything. They just chose
I guess it could have
comic
been,
book artist,
Yeah, you're right. All right, well, let's move into our home media moment. This is a foreign film that was nominated at the Oscars this year, and that is Wild Tales. Justin?
Wild Tales is an anthology of dark comedy shorts with variations of macabre themes. Some of the most notable include a deadly plane ride where everyone is connected to one sole individual, a revenge plot against a loan shark who ruined a young waitress's family,
like that one,
and a seemingly perfect wedding that goes horribly, horribly awry. This is one of those movies that there will likely be about as many people who find it hilarious as there will be people who find it sick, twisted, incredibly disturbing. Not all of the stories are effective, and to be honest with you, I thought a lot of the installments in the middle section kind of dragged. But honestly, it does come together for a really great finale that's fun in a very, very twisted way. The cinematography is really good. The performances in some sections are solid, and other times they leave a little bit to be desired. There's a driving section that's starts off well, but I think runs on a little bit too long. But it's one of the more interesting anthology films I've seen. I wish it wasn't 2 hours long, but it's fun, and I did laugh a couple times. I leave it with a B+.
Okay. Didn't seem all that positive.
Well,
do you want to expand on the positives a little bit?
No, I mean, I enjoyed the uniqueness of the stories. The first one I liked. I wish it was longer, which was sort of the prologue story. The waitress story I thought was really, really well done, though the ending was incredibly dark.
Gee, the endings are all pretty.
The movie's
pretty dark in this movie.
Pretty dark, yeah.
The last one has a sort of a happy ending, but
Dan, come on, you would agree, right?
Absolutely.
I did really like the stylistic components of this one, and I like the overall uniqueness of it. This isn't one of those movies you're going to find on another rack. It's a very unique selection of stories, and I appreciated that.
All right. Well, I do agree that the whole anthology thing is cool. I do have to say, though, you mentioned that it takes various forms in the storylines, but they are all revenge-based tales. Some are a little more obvious, maybe, than others. But, I mean, that is sort of the one thread that connects everything. More or less. All of them are based on some sort of revenge angle. I do think there's great energy here with most of it. Tarantino obviously has inspired a lot of this sort of stuff. It's very similar in tone, in content. But the problem is, like you mentioned, Justin, as with any anthology, the stories here don't get equal time and fluctuate in quality. The opening scene is a great kicker, and I agree, I really wanted to see more of that one. I mean, it's so short, 3 minutes maybe, and then some of them are a half hour. So sure enough. I really wish that had been a little more sort of balanced. I would say that my least favorite story does come somewhere in the middle, and that is the one part where it really dragged for me. But I would say I enjoyed most of the stories fairly equally, except for like 1.5 maybe. But that first one I really just wanted more time with.
I agree.
I understand their point. It's just a little kicker, and here's a sampler of what this movie's about. But I enjoyed it. Everything escalates also so quickly, so we can get to the next vignette that we don't really have time in some of them to fully appreciate those characters.
Agreed on that.
And then in others where it's a half hour,
it's way too long.
There's too much of that. So, but there's a fantastic mix here of the sublimely ridiculous while still tapping into our most primal desires that maybe don't seem all that ridiculous. Getting back at the towing company, for example, that has screwed you time and time again. But I agree with you. I give it a B+ overall. It needed to be better balanced. But there was only really one story that I didn't really go for. Joe, how about for you?
Well, this was quite a surprise. I like this one a lot, actually. Yeah,
I think you probably would.
No, I tend to like anthologies, especially when they're like more like horror revenge based stuff like that. It seems to be something I gravitate to. But the dark comedy is, as we discussed before, is very difficult to tackle. I did chuckle here and there, but I found this movie very disturbing. I found it incredibly dark. But I could still see the comedy, and I do agree. I feel like they led with their best one. Like, that opening was like, is this the whole movie?
Such a great tease.
Because, like, if this is going to be, like, 20 minutes or so, this might be awesome, but it's, like, 5 or something.
Or if you are going to do that, create some sort of bookend.
Yeah, like maybe, like, a little afterthought about maybe some newscast or something. Like, oh, no, there's, like, some bomb that said, like, I remember you too, random reporter. Boom! That was a pretty good little beginning there. I thought most of the stories were actually pretty good. I thought some of them were excellent. But the problem is that some of them are just a little too short or a little too long, like you guys said.
Right.
And I almost felt like you could have maybe nixed 1 or 2. And if you just like had 3 stories or 4, maybe that would have been perfect. I don't know. If they had a little more balance there to flesh it out, that would have been awesome. But even so, I thought most of them were very enjoyable. I thought the cinematography was great music. I actually thought the performances were pretty good. Very enjoyable movie. I'm a little above you guys. Leave with an A-.
Yeah, nobody was really giving a bad performance here.
No.
In some instances, because their vignette was so short, we didn't really get to know their character that well. Mm-hmm. But everybody was doing a good job performance-wise. What would you guys say is the best of the segments and the worst?
Actually, I think Justin already caught mine. Actually, my favorite segment, is the loan shark one. I felt like that could have been a whole movie, practically. And the driving one was... I liked the way it concluded, but it got a bit slow.
It goes on far too long.
It felt like we were on the desert. I'm like, yeah.
Justin, how about for you?
It's probably about the same. Though I honestly go between the loan shark story and the closing story with the marriage.
The wedding, yeah.
Yeah.
The wedding was pretty good.
Red wedding, as it were.
Basically.
I mean, essentially.
Hispanic.
Our apologies to George R.R. Martin. But
no spoilers here.
But worst is definitely the driving one.
Yeah, I don't...
Just goes on entirely too long.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I would say the best is the tow truck guy.
Okay.
That really, to me, was like... Have you guys both seen Falling Down?
I love that movie.
No, but I get the gist.
Figure that's a Joe classic.
Michael Douglas playing a bad person as usual.
I mean, that vignette specifically really reminded me of that. just because he's sticking it to the man in that. So I that was the only one of the really lengthy ones that did not feel too long for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other 3 or so really, I think, could have been trimmed by a bit and added on maybe, to the beginning ones a little bit more. But yeah, this was a very welcome surprise, I would say.
Pretty wild tales, I would say.
I would say they're very wild tales.
For lack of a better word.
I almost thought at the beginning, like, oh, this guy too. So they all going to like talk about all the crazy stuff this guy
That's
did.
what I thought.
I was like, this would be an interesting movie. Oh, wait, this is a vignette. This isn't going to
I actually went into it not knowing that was what this movie was. So I thought the whole movie was going to be about the airplane ladies.
Like, when I watched it, there was a synopsis of like 6 different tales. I'm like, oh, okay, there's 60 people on this plane. They're going to talk about this guy and how they knew him, and it's going to be really weird. And then not exactly.
Not quite.
It was I was like, oh, that's kind of funny and dark and not
upsetting.
Not that funny, actually.
But all right, so before we move on to our double feature of the older films, a couple of recent news items have come up about sequels and such. We talk about sequels a lot on the show, but this is a biggie. That's Toy Story 4. So let's start there. So now this is not going to be in theaters until June of 2017. They haven't even really started on much of it, but of course it does take them a couple years. So they've probably got some of the items fleshed out. Rashida Jones actually is part of the story writing team here, which is interesting. Wow. We love her.
Definitely.
And, she wrote co-wrote, I should say, Celeste and Jesse Forever, and her writing partner on that is also, part of the brain trust here.
Really?
Joss Whedon coming back?
Oh, that's right. He wrote, the first one, right?
Yeah.
No, I think he's got his hands full.
Yeah.
But this one is actually going to focus on finding Bo Peep, who was not really in the third one. They said that she was given away, I guess, between the second and third one. Did they say that in the movie, or people just figured that out? Okay.
What happened to Bo?
It's been a few years. I forgot. But so here we're going on a quest to find Bo Peep, and that's sort of what we know about it thus far. Personally, I think this movie doesn't need to exist. I'm sure I'll love it. I'm sure it'll be great because it's Pixar and it's Toy Story, but the trilogy was just capped so beautifully. We've said it before on this very show. Stick to the shorts. Stick to the TV specials. We don't need a fourth movie. But that being said, I'm sure it'll be good, though unnecessary. Justin, what do you think of the story behind this?
Well, it's one of those, I want to be harsher on it than I am, because I remember how much grief I gave Toy Story 3 until I actually sat down and watched it, and it turned out to be perfect.
Wait, why didn't you want to see Toy Story 3?
Let's be honest, the plot was not the world's most compelling. It's been years, and Andy's in college, and the toys are clearly past their prime, but they go out on one last quest to prove that they still have that same energy back from 1995.
Oh, I teared up at the trailer for that movie. Are you kidding? I couldn't wait to see it.
No, this was all before the trailer started
all right.
surfacing. Yes. So, I mean, and also...
Well, that's why I feel like we shouldn't judge, but until we really find out many things.
And also, I mean, Pixar is not exactly the world's best in terms of marketing, for lack of a better word.
True. I'll give you that one.
But, I mean...
Quality speaks for itself.
Yeah.
I also feel like this is going to be one of those cases that if they didn't have a story here, they wouldn't run with it. Cars 2, yes, I know. Personally, I'd rather see this as like a hour-long special on TV. I feel like it'd get a lot more ratings. And not to mention DVD sales and things like that. But, I mean, if they're going to do it, I guess the best thing I can say is just do it justice. Don't destroy a great franchise. Hopefully it turns out okay.
Well, listen, there's no denying that it's going to make
a ton of money.
Buckets more money in theaters than it ever would have with DVD sales only and running on TV.
It'll break records. Yeah.
It will break records. I agree with that. Toy Story 3 is already the biggest animated opening there is. The fan base just continues to grow as new children are watching the original trilogy. But Joe, what do you think of it?
I thought that Toy Story 3 did end the story well, but I don't think that it was like impossible to continue if they wanted to. I do think that with those characters, you could continue on. Now, would it be living up to the same level as the other movies? I'm not sure. But I think if they kind of expand a bit more on Bo Peep and Woody's relationship, because their romance was kind of a fairly significant part, if they want to expand on that, that could be good. Because even though she wasn't exactly like my favorite character, her missing from the third movie was a bit odd.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't mind capping on that. It could potentially be good, but it'll definitely be another direction. But then again, seeing them adjust to moving on with another child and being away from Andy, who knows?
Right.
Maybe we'll see them entering another stage. I mean, it's like the John Updike books with the Run Rabbit. You know, you think that the trilogy, but it goes throughout the whole life cycle, and they could still be good. So if Toy Story can do that for years and continue to grow with the audience as they get older and older, there's potential for some more good stuff.
Well, they are calling this movie a love story and a romantic comedy.
Okay.
Rather than a, kids movie or whatever else, you might call.
Yeah.
So it really is going to focus on this romance angle, I guess.
And the thing is, it's like we've always said that Toy Story, like a lot of great franchises, it kind of grows with the audience as well as, still being accessible to new ones. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the cool things about Toy Story, especially Toy Story 3.
And I think that's why 3 was so powerful for so many people.
Because it was tailored for the kids that grew up with the first two. So, I mean, if they continue with a new angle for keep upping the mature level and keeping that standard, I'm okay with it.
Why not? Yeah.
Okay. I do think if anybody can do it, Pixar can.
Yeah.
But then on the other end of the sequel scale, nothing is confirmed with this or anything, but Shyamalan is getting his name out there.
Shovel bomb.
In saying that he wants to do a Last Airbender 2, which obviously the first one was critically panned, big box office bomb. I don't know what's going on with this.
I don't see how anyone could possibly greenlight this.
Unless there was a practical joke of some kind. Like, I mean, literally.
Possibly, but here's the thing. For anyone who's looking at the marketing for The Visit, what's the one noticeable thing? They're clearly heavily trying to advertise the fact he made an Oscar-nominated movie with The Sixth Sense, and Unbreakable was well-received too, and The Village Happened, but Signs was okay.
Those are literally the 4 movies. They said it in... I remember the promo.
They take away his last, 6 movies and just focus on the originals.
From the director of the first 4 movies, and then it opens up with him talking, I'm going to bring the same qualities that did this and this, these movies. Yeah, 10 years ago, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first of all, I don't think Last Airbender should ever be a live-action movie. There's just way too many elements. And that painfully came to light in the horrible monstrosity that was The Last Airbender.
I mean, I don't think it's impossible, Justin. The sad thing about it is, with a lot of these adaptions, you can tell that somebody watched the show, but they just didn't care. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, too.
The thing that's really painful, though, sometimes you can tell there's a lot of factors that go into a movie that may have led to it being a downfall. But with Airbender, you can tell direction was a bad issue because these kids were literally given nothing. The acting was bad, but you can tell they were just reading off a project. Did they stop and say, no, can you emote just a little more? You've worked with Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis. You know how to get people to emote at the right moments. Mm-hmm. Come on.
But here's my counterpoint. Everyone still loves the animation. Legend of Korra is a very different story. However...
Yes.
However, if you just made an animated movie that was Last Airbender focused, people would still flock. It would still be a well-received movie.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they thought that it would be successful because of that, but I mean, word of mouth was pretty bad. And that's the problem now is that, I mean, it's considered one of the worst movies of all time, and fans of the show, of course, are going to be boycotting it from here to now. So
that's why I don't understand who he thinks
is going to come see
he's
it.
He's going to get, to finance this and like Justin said, greenlight it.
Because those are the only people that would come.
Not to mention, I feel like during all these interviews, he was sort of trying to pull a Josh Trank, okay, it was not my fault that this movie became a nightmare. The studio bullied me all over the place. I'm sorry, just because you're M. Night Shyamalan.
You're a big name.
You cannot tell me that they gave you The Last Airbender and did not give you some modicum of creative control. I'm sorry, I don't buy it.
It's tough to say.
I guess at that point in his career, that's probably true.
One thing I will say...
But I mean, now they would not.
I do feel kind of bad, though, because I do... It is kind of sad. You can tell... You know how, when they do those promos, they're usually canned? Mm-hmm. It's not canned. The guy is, saying, I did do good movies. I want to make good... You can tell he's I really want to make good movies. Well,
and the limited series he had on Fox this summer, Wayward Pines, was very well received.
Well, there you go.
Both critically and with audiences. And so, maybe people...
Well, look.
Will appreciate his work again. I don't know. But it's... I mean, his last good movie was a long time ago.
Look, I think... Maybe this new one, I will give him the benefit of a doubt. Okay? This is the last, though. This is the last one.
Not Justin. He's already
No.
He's already readying his map for the visit.
No, because look, at least Shyamalan's not hiding it. It's gonna be cheesy. It's gonna be silly. But you know what? Maybe there's something there. Maybe, as you said, he did some good TV. So obviously got some talent somewhere.
All right. Well, we'll see if that goes anywhere. I doubt it will, honestly.
No, it's not going to happen, man.
God bless him for trying, but
no.
I don't think we're going to be reviewing that one anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to see The Land of Earth, unfortunately.
No. So let's move into our older films. We've got an old classic that Joe picked out for us, and that is Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country.
Or The Undiscovered Plumber, I would say.
That is true. The Undiscovered Christopher.
You know how he actually got into the role?
No.
Well, he and Shatner were friends. They did some radio work together, and so Shatner wanted to come in and be in the movie. And the one reason he looked so different is because he didn't want to deal with all the makeup, so he requested a slightly more human design because it was just too hot for him. So, there's a connection there. But anyway, Star Trek VI, kind of weird I'm leading this one, The Undiscovered Country, is a 1991 science fiction film, part of the Star Trek franchise, following The Final Frontier, which nearly destroyed the franchise. This is kind of the movie that saved it, got it back on track. And it's the last film to feature the original cast from the original series. After the destruction of the moon Praxis, it leads to the Klingon Empire pursuing peace with their longtime adversaries, the Federation of Planets. And the crew of the USS Enterprise must race against unseen conspirators with a militaristic agenda, as Captain Kirk and McCoy are framed for a murder, as apparently the Enterprise fired on the Chancellor's ship, and, well, mystery reveals itself. Now, this film was directed by Nicholas Meyer, who most famously did Wrath of Khan, probably the highest-rated Star Trek movie ever.
I would say so.
So it was kind of a safe bet at that point. Little history for you. They're like, okay, if this is going to be our last movie, let's do it right. Let's get the guy that knows. And of course, Nimoy worked on the story as well as Koenig and everybody really. And interestingly enough as well, it's the only Star Trek movie to win a Saturn Award. Which if you
That's
guys
surprising.
Well, to be fair, I actually was surprised about that too. But if you guys don't know, that's basically the Oscar, award season for everything the Oscars don't acknowledge, which is horror, sci-fi, and fantasy. So I love that one. But the real reason is, first of all, I think this one was pretty well received, which it was. And also, you got to remember, too, the competition. True, 82 had Wrath of Khan, but look at everything else. Blade Runner, E.T., the list goes on. Great year for sci-fi. But it's okay. They got nominated plenty of times. This one, the reason I wanted to run it was because I've been itching to do a Star Trek movie for you guys. But I know that we typically go with in order, with the franchise. And I'm like, but the good thing about the Star Trek movies is really they're fairly self-contained. There's enough going on in the individual story that you won't be super lost. This one is my favorite, and that's why I decided to run it. And I don't even know if I can really explain why. I think that some of the movies are just as good, maybe even better. But this one's always spoken to me. I like the mystery aspect because it's the only Star Trek movie to do that. I always love the political aspects of Star Trek, which, to be honest, this is the only one that really gets deep into the politics of anything. It's also an allegory for the Cold War, obviously the Klingons for USSR, the wall going down. It was a good send-off to the original cast. I love the comedy there. I think that for Kirk and McCoy, they got some really good chemistry, which they've had in all the movies. Plus, Spock gets to go to the helm. Kim Cattrall plays a new character, does an excellent job there. Christopher Plummer is my favorite Star Trek villain. He plays this really cool, evil Klingon general. I like the allegories. I like the adventure. The makeup's great. The effects are good. It's a really fun, great capstone to the original series, and it's always been my favorite. So, it's my top 25. So, it's an A+ movie.
Okay.
And to be fair, I like all the Star Trek movies, even the bad ones. But this one I just really always spoke to me. So I'm really curious how this went over with you guys, because Star Trek 6, were they like totally lost? Because there were a couple things that I might have had to explain a little bit.
Well, I do think it's one of the stronger entries in the film canon. I can't say I like it better than 4. 4 is a classic, and the first one I ever saw, so certainly has some sentimental value, for that.
4 is like also one of the highest rated, so that's fine too.
But what I like about 6 is that it keeps like some of the humor from the 4th installment, but it is a more traditional Trek film in how it's handled. There's a great mystery element. You're right.
So
I love the mystery. Classic Klingons. Gotta have them in there. As much as 4 is my favorite, I would say it's a little maybe too jokey.
Oh.
I do think that which is probably why I like it the best.
Well, you think 4 is a little too jokey?
Yeah, a little bit.
But it's a Star Trek comedy.
I know, and that's that's why.
Well, to be fair, most of the Star Trek movies have some of them.
They have some humor, but that's what I mean. Like, I think this one finds a really nice balance.
Good.
Between, like, because the TV show wasn't very jokey.
Actually, once again, old science fiction, pretty serious.
Very heavy.
And unintentionally funny.
And unintentionally funny sometimes. So I think this sort of balances that, which I think Next Generation had as a series, I think, in spades. Mm-hmm. That really good balance between the comedy and the more cerebral types of elements that made the first show a success.
And the cool thing about Next Gen, which they got to expand on more, is because they had a longer show to go with, you could have episodes that experimented with different things. Like you had comedies, you had more serious stuff, political stuff, science, mysteries, and all kinds of things. So,
and as an aside, for our listeners here, we will be doing a Star Trek feature here on the Merlin channel, Joe's channel, called Boldly Going, where we're going to take a look at all of the different franchises TV-wise that Star Trek has. So we'll definitely get more in depth with Next Gen and the original series. But in terms of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, I do think it drags a little bit in the midsection maybe. Christopher Plummer's a little bit hammy. I do like his villain, but he does go for broke a little bit too much, I think, in this. But it's a great send-off to the original classic crew. I give it an A-.
Okay.
Justin? Justin is the least
Star Trek oriented.
Trek oriented here. So I'm interested to see what he thinks.
I think this is the first one you'll get a full experience of something outside of Abrams. So I'm curious to see. I know you saw most of 4, right?
Yeah, I was going to say there's 20 minutes of 4 I haven't seen, so I don't count that as actually seeing it.
Yeah, well, it's close though.
I know Dan wouldn't, so
you're right. See the whole movie.
But honestly, Star Trek. The older I get, the more I start to see the vast differences between Star Trek and Star Wars. It's always
This was a mystery?
Hang on.
Okay, go ahead.
Always very commonly compared with each other, but honestly...
Apples and oranges, dude.
It's apples and oranges to like the umph degree. They're incredibly different.
It's more like fruits and vegetables.
I would say that they're probably only linked
because they're so successful.
Because they're the most successful sci-fi franchises in history, and to a person that doesn't know anything about sci-fi, and they have the same first word in the title. To anybody that doesn't know anything about sci-fi, it's the easy go-to, I think.
That's true.
Yeah,
but they're very, very different things.
Yeah, which is why I'm starting to sort of come to the realization. These comparisons are not really fair.
Thank you. What comparisons have you heard? I got to hear more about this.
Well, I mean, growing up, it was like, okay,
Star Wars versus Star Trek.
Star Wars was like this approachable, kind of fun adventure story. Star Trek was...
Only for geeks, right?
These boring characters, they have their phasers. And, oh, beam me up, Scotty.
My poor dad in high school, man.
Look, this is the thing, though. Okay, I'm not going to go into it.
The cheese stands alone, okay?
Look, the point is, though...
Cut to 20 years later, and Star Trek's the most popular thing.
No matter what anybody says over there in the Star Wars camp, Star Trek has endured for a reason.
Oh, yeah. No,
I agree.
There's a reason it's withstood the test of time. But what I liked about this was instead of the Abrams very adventurous heavy, trying to emulate the more Star Wars savvy tropes, the sixth installment dares to focus on being an in-depth murder mystery. And it's crafted fairly well. I thought the development of how far these characters have come really shows off in volumes. However, I also feel like the reveal in that regard is a little bit obvious.
It is a little obvious, I will admit.
And I also feel like that also takes hold a lot during the trial where it tries to get more into the political aspect, which isn't a bad thing. But if you're going to go quasi-courtroom drama with it in a sci-fi dystopia, I know that's a little bit weird. John Grisham's probably thinking missed opportunity.
Actually, but... to be more accurate, Justin, believe it or not, it's a sci-fi utopia. Think about that for a second.
And I don't know. The courtroom's kind of terrifying.
Well, it's Klingon, so they don't think it's a dystopia, but Star Trek in general is a utopian concept.
Yeah. But to continue, I really do respect this as being sort of a bookend to the original series with the cast and crew. I think it's a pretty solid send off, and I think it's pretty much a treat for any fans who have truly stayed the course.
And I think if I had to say why I think this one is my favorite, I think it's because for me, growing up, I loved the original series. It's not my favorite anymore, but I have such an attachment to the characters. Seeing this as basically the end of their story, it's hard for me not to get a little choked up at the end. So that might be what it is. It kind of speaks to me for the franchise as a whole. It is a good send-off. And we did mention this in the special we're doing, but if there was a Star Trek movie that's been perditioned, this is considered to be one of the good Star Trek movies, but it's probably the one that's the least talked about.
Yeah, nobody does talk about it. You're absolutely right. They talk about the worst ones.
And the best.
And then they talk about Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock.
What I really think puts us above is the fact that it's fan service, but unlike most movies nowadays that are being fan service, it isn't hitting you over the head with the fact that it's fan service. And I really do love that. I think it's accessible for fans. I think it's accessible for people like me who like Trek, but what I don't think are worthy of being called Trekkers anytime soon. But for me, I live with an A-.
Okay. It's about right, I'd say. I'm glad you guys liked it. I didn't think you wouldn't,
No, it's pretty great.
It's a very good movie. I don't know. If I was going to run with my first Star Trek, I might as well run with my favorite.
Yeah.
Get you guys a good introduction. But, no, I think Wrath of Khan might just probably technically the better movie. But, I don't know. Everyone always says that it's their favorite.
So Plummer is a better villain to you than Khan?
No. No.
Oh, okay. I thought you said he was your favorite villain.
He is my favorite.
Oh, okay.
But those terms are not mutually exclusive.
You're right.
No, I believe that Khan is the best written villain in Star Trek, at least in terms of the movies. The series, various series, there are better ones.
Sure.
Obviously, they got hundreds of episodes. But Khan is excellent because he's actually from the series and they develop on that end. Montalban plays this iconic villain amazingly. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
If he's considered the best Trek villain by pretty much everyone, that's fine. I like Plummer personally because I do like the hamminess, and I do like he's very evil and maybe evil for evil's sake a little bit, but he's fun. He's classic Star Trek villain. Yeah, honestly, he's a good send off.
Yeah, that I would agree with.
And I think he looks great. I think he's a great actor, so he gives a great performance to it. He actually bounces off Shatner pretty well. So it's pretty good.
He is pretty unrecognizable though.
I know. They did a pretty good job even with the light makeup.
Yeah, I was going to say for somebody that didn't want that much makeup done on him, he's pretty unrecognizable.
But no, I find him really enjoyable. He's a personal favorite of mine. But no, I mean, Khan's a better villain. I mean, the Borg Queen in First Contact's better. I mean, there are better villains in the movies.
Yeah.
But not that many, actually. Generally, it's more situational rather than villain-based in the movies. But Chang is really one of the more awesome ones, I think, for sure.
Yeah, definitely a good send-off for the gang. All right, well, up next, we are going to have our Oscar A to Z. We're up to the movie Bad Girl. It was a 1931 film, nominated for 3 awards. It won 2 of them, Director and Best Writing, and it was also nominated for Best Picture. In this, Eddie and Dorothy, played by James Dunn and Sally Eilers, are 2 people who don't believe in love, but nevertheless, they realize there may be some sort of spark between them and decide to give romance a shot. After leaving her waiting in the rain for their second date, though, she finds his apartment and goes over to give him what for. They end up falling asleep, though, and before they know it, it's 4 in the morning, and Dorothy realizes she has to concoct a story for why she's out so late to tell her protective brother. She ends up leaving her brother's house to make a go for it with Eddie, and over time they realize that maybe their initial fears about the opposite sex may ring true. Bad Girl is based on a play from the year before and directed by Frank Borzage, and is a very enjoyable take on romance and the ups and downs of marriage. Nothing that major really happens other than people living their everyday lives and having everyday problems, but the script is sharp and I'd say pretty true to life, and the 2 leads, who I'm not familiar with at all, really embrace their characters. It's also clearly one of the templates for some of the tropes we still see in romance films today, and in that respect it's ahead of its time. And also, I think it's a bit ahead of its time in tackling situations with gender roles, among other things. I really like this movie a lot. It is an A- for me. Justin?
Well, this is one of those cases where I think historical context for analysis has to come into play, particularly not necessarily with Babes in Arms' use of racism, but this time in terms of melodrama and thematic elements. This one obviously has stage roots, which is, I think, a bit of blessing and a curse because it's extremely heavy-handed with its themes. And to the modern moviegoer, it will probably look like it's bordering on after-school special at times. But they're handled maturely, and I agree with you, Dan. They're very ahead of their time. And the performances, though in spurts, really do show some impressive work. I wish there was some better cinematography and some better editing choices to do feel like it drags in some spots, but it's still fairly good drama with a lot of really interesting observations. I leave with a B.
Okay. Joe?
I've actually noticed something. I don't know if it's a decade thing, but when it comes to like most films drama-wise, I feel like I really like the ones from the 30s more than the 40s and 50s.
I do too, actually.
I don't know why that is, but like the last couple we've hit around this time.
Well, I feel like because that was during the war and then post-war, they were trying to find things that were more escapist.
Yeah, you know what? That might be a good explanation, because it feels like there was a lot of escapism and a lot of, I'd say, a lot fluffier stuff. Like less. I just feel like with these Oscars in the 30s, it feels we got some really heavy stuff that's ahead of its time.
Well, if I may add to that, though, Justin,
please.
It was also, this movie is pre-rating system,
That's true.
Hays Code even. So you've got a pretty open-ended canvas to put whatever you want on the screen. That's why that one, what was the Angels with Dirty Faces? Was so gritty, you know, and that was from what, 34, I want to say?
Oh my God, with the freaking, like, electric chair.
Yes,
yeah.
I mean, you know, so I feel like, you know, because of that, they were able to do a little more. And in the 40s and 50s, not only maybe is it more for escapism, but also I think
heavy ratings.
Parents were a little bit more concerned with what their kids were watching.
Censorship and what have you.
Plus TV coming on the waves, too.
Right.
You know, that probably speaks to the point as well. You're both right. And that might be one reason why, because there's just less of a filter. Mm-hmm. And it feels like, you know, we kind of took a step back for a couple decades there. But really, this is another example. I love the dialogue here. I thought the characters did handle their themes very well. I'd see where the whole modern after-school special thing might come from. But once again, for like 1931... this is some pretty ballsy stuff.
Yeah, we're talking about 85 years ago.
I'm like, you're expecting something rather flimsy and like, pretty. No, they're tackling some pretty legitimate stuff here. And the overbearing brother, like, that was intense.
Yeah, that was intense.
I was like fearing for her life, and I'm like, it was just so.
I liked her friend a lot.
Her friend was good. It felt like I was watching an actual scene from something that would be on TV now. Mm-hmm. Honestly, like, it was really, really fascinating. I thought the performances were really good. I thought the guy was a little bit more of a caricature than the girl. The main lead,
I would agree with that.
I thought she was a very fleshed out character, and I really liked her performance. I thought she was a very likable character, and it was really a nice little time capsule. Once again, another little surprise. I'm in between you guys. Leave it with a B+.
Okay. Yeah, I was surprised about this one, and this is one that has only sort of kind of survived. I mean, there's a lot of jumping in the picture and, you know, a couple of audio issues, unfortunately. But I think it's great that, you know, they are restoring a lot of these really old movies. Algiers is the other one that comes to mind.
Man, though.
With you know, that one had a lot of audio problems. This is probably one of the ones in worse shape since then, I would say.
Do you mean Alibi?
Alibi, that's what it was. You're right.
Alibi I really liked, but man, that was some rough quality.
And I will say, I don't know if that was also Fox, but I think the set for her brother's house is the same as that house.
I could believe
Alibi.
I
could see it.
So if that was Fox, I would say they're the same.
In like 1930, how many did they have, right?
Yeah,
well, also in that era, film distributors were trading off sets left and right. So
yeah, sure, makes sense.
Yeah.
But no, I agree, Justin. You know, sure, in 2015 it looks a little bit corny maybe in some instances.
Oh,
but
I agree, but taking into account when it was made, I mean, it's pretty awesome.
We always go back to the whole sound era thing. I mean, this is 2 years after sound films started. And I think that's also another thing that speaks to the editing and the cinematography, Justin, is that, yeah, it is a little shaky, I guess, but I think people were still figuring out how do we take a popular play and put it on a screen. They were used to doing radio versions of popular plays.
That's true.
But on screen with the cameras, maybe not so much.
That's true.
So,
but I don't know. I think that there are some ways. I mean, we've seen plenty of films where you can have that play atmosphere. I think Roger and Hammerstein is like one of the best examples later on where it's obviously a set, but it doesn't really matter. You know?
Well, I think it's one of those cases of less can be so much more. Mm-hmm. You're right, Dan. Implementing sound was certainly starting to become a new component, but at the same time, it can't just be a gimmick the entire movie. And obviously there's performances here, and obviously there's a storyline, but there's a point where the play ends, and I mean the stage ends and film begins. And I feel like with this and a couple of the other entries on the Oscar-nominated list that we've been running through for 2 years, we've found some that really find that balance, and some that just completely are stuck in that void. And
well, at the same time, though, this is not a very location-based movie. I mean, it's very minimal sets anyway.
That's true.
Somebody's apartment, the street corner. I mean, it's sort of, to put it in terms of like a more recent movie, August Osage County, really didn't need that much in terms of different sets and stuff. Most of it takes place in the yard of the house.
Right.
By the way, Dan, Partitioned?
August Osage County? Actually, yeah, because that was a huge movie when it came out. Good one.
I was thinking about that one.
When we think about stage play to the screen, I think if it doesn't have that much that it needs, like, I don't know. A lot of the plays that aren't musicals, I think, translate pretty well to the screen because it really is only a few set pieces typically.
That's true. But I also feel like there are some instances where you can clearly tell this is like, okay, this would be where the actor or actress would be monologuing on stage.
Yeah,
and that's great for the stage. It's not so great for film.
True. But, again, I think they're still working it out in 1931.
Fair point.
But, all right, well, that is our show for this week. Joe, any new stuff on the Merlin channel? Obviously, we'll have Boldly Going here in the next week or two.
Yeah, that should be coming up. I mean, I've got my schedule up on the website for requests. I'll be doing some more character analysis stuff. The main character of this series called Hunter x Hunter is next. And, I'll be going to this little anime convention up here this weekend, so I'll be
very cool.
Doing my panel and some other stuff, hopefully. So hopefully I have some stuff to show you from that.
Nice. All right, and you guys can subscribe to our YouTube channel here, as well as join us on the Facebook group, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and the Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next time. Bye.